very quick video. This is the third time that I've done it, and I basically just want to talk about sort of the archives and the players of the world and of the game and of the scholars, right? So sociology in America, they have concepts of actors, and these actors represent people who can sway institutions. A big thing was these actors dominate and create sort of a world government. These actors or state actors or whatever, they're not officially institutions, but they can act upon the institutions or to push a particular agenda to create more of an international state. But if you look at the history of science and mathematics, the standardization of science and mathematics, you will see that this was the whole point overall. And this is really not an argument, because that's how you get the National League. That's how you get the science collaborations that they've been having since, I don't know, the 17th century. And it's all by the same players. And you have the conquering of the largest institution of archives that you can possibly get, and that is Africa and Asia and the other places, right? When this is where they still had mystery systems, like older mystery systems and archives, okay? So with that being said, how does this affect reality? Well, they have the concept of the Renaissance, right? The Renaissance, which is about bringing into Europe the renewing of intelligent and the flowing of course, art. Trade, art, music, all these things equal a culture and society. It is what makes people not in the dark ages, the expressions of these particular culture. Of course, you have the interfighting and everything else that go along with it, the players of the game. So whenever you learn the liberal arts, you learn grammar, math, etc., music. All of this integrates together because it has to do with the high level of human consciousness. What you see now in the West is just people at a particular state of mind where it's mostly negative. So in African American art, you see the same old concepts of trauma over and over again. A lot of the women's art, at least the stuff that they push, you see the same sort of concepts over and over again. Or you'll see like the opposite of that, which is like big cherry looking things or cartoon things. Like people learn to make cartoons, but they don't really understand the higher level of what art is. They know how to copy something or to make caricature art. Trauma art and caricature art, and it's a loop, sort of on like a loop. And this is something that was done purposely. So it's not something that starts and then ends because people and places and things have changed. This is a continuation of a ultimate goal of creating this particular net. Now, this art existed with the Persian and the Moor Empire. And it had a lot also to do with genetics. So it wasn't just about bringing in art, it was also bringing in people from certain bloodlines to then, I guess, counter diseases and things like that. If you think about what they do in history, or they say in history, it's because, the Europeans came over to this state and they messed up people's, environment by introducing diseases, etc., etc. Okay, so you see the opposite of that, where someone has a high level of resistance to something, they come in and they actually raise up the population by essentially introduce high levels of genetics. But with that comes higher learning, higher concepts, and that also means less state control. So with the big thing, because also with that comes, and I know I sound so disjointed, but stay with me, okay? If you can learn the disjointed math, you can stay through this video. So how do we know that this is international players? Like, how do we know it's connected? The timeline is the same. The calendars are the same. Before, they have different calendars. In some places, they are still a year behind. The markets sync up, okay? Trade flow syncs up, okay? You can hedge something. That's very important. You can hedge via country, okay? Another one is the concept of money that's not backed by anything but people believing in you. That's a big thing. Before, um, if you pledge your allegiance to a particular belief system or state, you had land and gold and other things that were a legacy and that's transferable. In the opposite polarity, which is the Dark Ages, which is what they're ushering in right now, is you own nothing. You know, nothing. You will be a millionaire one day and then a millionaire, a minus millionaire the next day. That's the concept, because there is no support. There's no goal there. There's nothing coming into this reality, which is essentially how they think. They think that the intelligent benchmarks that they have for AI works, but when you submit it into the reality and you actually start using the models, they don't work the way they're supposed to. But they go back and they say, well, we did this mathematical equation or mathematical method, not equation, and it says that it works and it does what it's supposed to, therefore it is. And this goes for everything, including science and math. There's tons and tons and tons of research on things that have never came into fruition into this reality. But they have a suspended belief system when it comes to archaeologists and anthropologists. I mean, you really gotta believe, because there's no evidence for a lot of the stuff that they do, literally. But they believe because they have the absence of human story, like the opposite of cultural anthropology is archaeology, but archaeology with just mathematics. And when I mean mathematics, I mean lateral math, not cipher math, not these cool extractions or manifestations of math. We're just dealing with math in a void. It only exists within their simulation and works within the simulation, but doesn't work in this world. Okay? With that being said, you have what they're trying to say is the ultimate level of humanity, but it actually is the opposite, because it's not a rebirth, it's the death. It's the death of art, it's the death of books, and it's the death of the creative. Therefore, it's the death of the creation. So if there's no more creation, then you have death and decay. Now they can destroy everything and then try to usher in a new, wave of information. There's a possibility, but I don't know if they're going to be able to do that, because you have to have some sort of cultivation. Again, also goes with genetics too, and people's minds. It's very hard to get writers it's very hard to get people to think about concepts differently. That's why you had certain writers write particular kinds of books. And now you have anybody writing books, and they're not getting taught, nor they're going to the process of being a writer. Okay? And, some of that also is probably a good editor of storytelling. So you miss that. And you also see a lot of people just copying like Mozart. Let's talk about music. They're copying Mozart versus them composing themselves. Like, what is a new composer? Has anyone heard of like a new composer that people know about? If you look at modern music, it's a lot of synthesis and copies of instruments. I like messing around and doing it, but it's not the same quality. Again, going into the studio and singing over some loops is not the same as being in studio and then, hearing the guitar and hearing the drums. Also, there's a problem because you got to deal with personalities, but that's kind of the whole thing, is that you guys create a creative space. I like both. I don't have anything against using computers or anything. I think it's cool, but they are literally killing the music in order to copy a dead concept. So kill the carbon copy and then just keep on recycling the concepts, because they don't want to go through the muses. So therefore, they do not have a renaissance. They have the opposite, and that is the dark age. So it's the digital dark age.